There comes a moment when even the strongest heart feels the silence of heaven. You look around and realize how much has slipped through your hands. Relationships that faded, opportunities that vanished, dreams you once believed were certain. And somewhere inside, you ask the question no one dares to voice aloud: will God ever restore what I've lost? This is where the true journey of faith begins, not in abundance, but in the emptiness that calls you back to trust. Every sunrise carries a whisper from eternity, a reminder that what you've lost is not forgotten by the one who created you. The light breaking through the horizon is not just another day beginning. It is a message written in gold across the sky, telling you that God is still working even in the unseen. The same power that raised the sun this morning can raise your hope again. Restoration does not begin when circumstances change. It begins when your heart dares to believe again. There are things you thought were gone forever, pieces of your story that seemed erased by time or by pain. But God doesn't lose what belongs to Him. What you think is the end is often His hidden preparation. You may not see the full picture yet, but every setback, every unanswered prayer, every long night of silence is shaping you for something greater. The losses you endured did not define your failure. They revealed the strength of your faith. Today is not just another morning. It is a sacred moment between you and God, an invitation to stop running from the ache and start surrendering to His process. The world teaches you to fight for control, but restoration begins when you release control. What if the thing you lost is the very thing God will use to rebuild your foundation? What if the delay you fear is not denial, but divine protection? This morning prayer is more than words. It's a renewal of your covenant with faith. It's a reminder that your tears were seen, your efforts remembered, and your pain never wasted. The God who restores does not simply return what was taken. He multiplies it. He transforms wounds into wisdom, confusion into clarity, and loss into legacy. You are not stepping into another day, you are stepping into a divine appointment. So as you listen, open your heart. Let each word draw you closer to the certainty that nothing is truly lost when placed in the hands of the one who redeems all things. The same God who parted seas still parts despair. The same God who raised the dead still raises hope. Restoration begins here, not someday, not later, but right now in this very moment of surrender. When loss becomes the door to renewal. There is a moment in every believer's life when God allows something to break, not to punish, but to rebuild on stronger ground. You may not understand it at first. The job that slipped away, the friendship that dissolved, the dream that collapsed before it even began. These moments feel like endings, but in truth, they are transitions. What you lost was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to clear space for what is coming. When you look back, you realize that some of the things you begged God to protect were never aligned with His plan for your destiny. Loss often becomes the tool He uses to remove what could have chained you to the wrong path. But in the middle of that process, the heart trembles. You pray, but heaven feels silent. You stand in the ruins of what used to be, trying to understand how to start again. Yet this is the ground where miracles grow, not in certainty, but in surrender. Renewal does not arrive wrapped in comfort. It begins in the soil of trust. God does not need everything to remain the same to bless you again. In fact, He often requires change to release something greater. Sometimes He will let what you built fall apart so that you can finally see the foundation He has been preparing all along. That is why faith is not the absence of pain. It is the decision to believe in purpose while you still feel broken. Each loss you have faced carries within it a hidden message from God. This is not where your story ends. What looks like the end of a season is often the beginning of your transformation. The person you are becoming cannot exist in the same place as the person you were. God's renewal starts by reshaping your identity, removing fear, planting resilience, and reviving your capacity to hope. There will be mornings when you still feel the weight of what is gone, and that is normal. Healing is not denial. It is faith choosing to move even when emotions try to hold you back. Speak life over your pain. Declare that every empty space will be filled with divine purpose. Because what God restores is never a simple replacement. It is always a resurrection. He takes what died and breathes life into it again, stronger, wiser, deeper than before. So stand firm in this truth. You are not defined by what you lost, but by what you choose to believe now. Renewal is happening, even in the silence. God is rebuilding unseen, and soon what once broke you will become the testimony that lifts others. This is the sacred paradox of faith, that the road to restoration begins with letting go of what you thought you needed to be whole. The silent work of God in the middle of the storm. There are moments when you pray, yet the heavens seem closed. You wait for a sign, a breakthrough, a word that never seems to come. In that silence, doubt begins to whisper, maybe God forgot me. Maybe this loss is forever. But what if the silence is not absence? What if it is the sound of God working quietly beneath the surface, rearranging your story in ways your eyes cannot yet see? The greatest works of God are often done in secret. Seeds grow in darkness before they break the soil. Healing begins inside before it shows on the outside. Restoration is not an event. It's a process hidden beneath layers of surrender. When God is silent, He is not distant. He is deep at work, aligning the details, preparing the right people, opening the right doors. Silence is not a punishment. It is preparation. Think about the moments when you felt abandoned but later realized those were the very seasons that shaped your strength. Every unanswered prayer was a lesson in trust. Every closed door was a redirection towards something better. God never wastes silence. It is His sacred classroom, teaching you patience, maturity, and discernment. The silence trains your heart to listen beyond noise, to sense His presence even when His voice is quiet. You may be standing in the storm right now, watching the waves crash over everything you tried to hold together. But even in the storm, God's hand is steering you. What looks like chaos is often divine choreography. The wind that threatens to break you is the same wind that will carry you to your next season. God's timing may not align with your expectations, but it is never late. What He builds in secret will be revealed in its perfect hour. When nothing seems to move, faith must speak louder than fear. This is where trust becomes real, not when everything is visible, but when nothing is. Whisper in the middle of your waiting, God, I know You are working, even if I can't see it. That simple confession of faith carries power. It turns anxiety into peace and invites heaven to move. Restoration begins not with evidence, but with endurance. The silent work of God refines your spirit so that when the blessing comes, your heart is ready to carry it. The storm you face now is not proof of His absence. It's the setting for your miracle. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. And soon, what was once a wilderness will bloom with everything you prayed for in ways far greater than you imagined. The moment. Heaven begins to move. There is a divine rhythm that governs the unseen. You may not hear it, but it exists. A quiet pulse that beats through every prayer, every tear, every whisper of faith that leaves your lips. When you cry out to God from a place of surrender, something begins to shift in heaven. The moment you decide to believe again, the spiritual atmosphere around your life starts to change. Restoration begins not when circumstances align, but when faith ignites again inside the heart. God moves in response to trust, not to noise. You don't need perfect words, long prayers, or flawless faith. You need only a sincere heart that says, "Lord, I still believe you can do it." That confession pierces through the weight of despair and reaches the throne of grace. The same God who heard Daniel in the lion's den, who listened to Hannah's silent cry, still hears you today. The heavens are not deaf to your pain. They are attentive, waiting for the sound of your surrender. There is a point when waiting becomes sacred. When your spirit stops striving and starts trusting, you create space for God to act. Sometimes He delays not to deny, but to deepen your faith. He knows that what is built too fast cannot last. The blessing you long for must have roots strong enough to endure once it comes. So while you wait, He shapes your heart, purifies your motives, and teaches you to depend on Him instead of the outcome. The greatest miracles often begin in the quiet decision to keep praying when nothing changes. Each time you choose faith over frustration, heaven takes notice. God begins aligning people, places, and moments you haven't even seen yet. Your prayer today might already be setting in motion the restoration you'll walk into tomorrow. Nothing prayed in faith is ever lost. Heaven stores every word, every sigh, every tear, and releases them in due season. When God moves, it rarely happens in noise or spectacle. His restoration unfolds like morning light, gentle, steady, unstoppable. You may wake up one day and realize that the pain that once consumed you has faded. The doors that were closed are opening, and peace has returned to your heart. That is how heaven moves, subtly but powerfully, turning impossibilities into testimonies. This is your reminder that heaven is already in motion. Your obedience has been heard. Your faith has been seen. The silence was not a delay. It was divine alignment. God's movement may be invisible, but it is never absent. Keep praying, keep believing, keep standing. Because when heaven begins to move, no power on earth can stop what God has ordained for your restoration. When faith becomes stronger than fear. Fear always arrives first. It enters the heart through what you see, what you hear, what you imagine could go wrong. It tells you that what was lost will never return, that God is silent because you are forgotten, that your prayers have no power. Fear is persuasive because it speaks to your senses, but faith speaks to your soul. And that is why faith is stronger. It sees what fear cannot. It holds on when logic breaks. It believes even when there is nothing left to prove it. Faith is not denial of reality. It is a declaration that God's reality is greater than what your eyes can see. When fear says, "It's over," faith whispers, "Watch what God will do next." Every great story of restoration began with someone who dared to believe again after everything fell apart. Abraham believed in the promise of a son when his body said it was impossible. Joseph believed in destiny from a prison cell. Mary believed in the miracle of life without understanding how it could happen. Faith has never needed perfect conditions to grow, only a willing heart. The enemy's greatest strategy is not destruction, it is distraction. If he can fill your mind with fear, he can silence your faith. But the moment you choose to trust God more than your emotions, the balance of power shifts. Faith changes the atmosphere. It takes you out of survival and into surrender. It gives you authority to speak life over death, to declare light where darkness once ruled. Fear collapses when confronted by faith that refuses to bow. You will never feel completely ready to trust again, and that is precisely why it's called faith. It begins in trembling, but it ends in triumph. The heart that keeps believing through uncertainty becomes the vessel through which God releases restoration. Fear thrives in control, but faith thrives in surrender. So release the need to understand and focus on the certainty of who God is. He has never failed to turn ashes into beauty, and He will not start now. When you choose faith, you open the door for heaven to intervene. You begin to see how every delay, every loss, every detour was preparing you for something greater. Fear says your story ended in the fall, but faith says the story truly begins in the rising. You are not standing at the end of something. You are standing at the threshold of restoration, and in this sacred moment, God is calling you to take one step, not toward what you lost, but toward who you are becoming. Because once faith becomes stronger than fear, restoration is no longer a possibility. It becomes a promise in motion, the power of surrender, and the renewal of strength. There comes a time when holding on does more damage than letting go. You've tried to fix it, control it, understand it, but nothing changes. That's when God invites you into the mystery of surrender. True strength is not found in resistance, but in release. It's the moment you say, "Lord, I don't know how, but I trust you anyway." That simple act of surrender is not weakness. It's spiritual courage. It is the place where your human strength ends and divine power begins. Surrender is not giving up. It is handing over. It's the decision to stop fighting battles that belong to God. It's saying, "I can't carry this anymore, but I believe you can." And when you do, something supernatural happens. Peace enters the spaces that worry once ruled. The same God who holds the universe holds your heart, and He knows exactly how to rebuild what's been broken. When you stop striving, you make room for Him to move. The renewal of strength always begins after surrender. You cannot pour new oil into a heart still clinging to old pain. God renews what is released to Him. When Elijah reached his lowest point, exhausted and ready to give up, God didn't rebuke him. He restored him. He sent an angel not with explanations, but with nourishment. That's how God renews, quietly, tenderly, in moments when you least expect it. The weight you've been carrying was never yours to bear forever. Faith was never meant to be a burden. It was meant to be a bridge. When you let go of what drains you, God fills you with what sustains you. He replaces anxiety with assurance, confusion with clarity, exhaustion with endurance. The strength you need for this season will not come from effort, but from rest in His presence. Sometimes surrender means silence. You don't have to explain your pain to everyone. Some things are between you and God alone. Let Him rewrite your inner dialogue. Let Him heal the memories that keep replaying. Restoration often begins quietly, in tears that no one else sees, in prayers whispered at dawn. And in that sacred stillness, God breathes new life into your spirit. The world teaches that control equals power, but heaven teaches that surrender equals peace. When you let go, you don't lose, you align. You step into the flow of divine order where every loss becomes a lesson and every waiting season becomes preparation. The hands that open and surrender are the same hands God fills with blessings beyond what they once held. You are not giving up. You are growing up in faith. What you place in God's hands never disappears. It transforms. And when the morning comes, you'll realize that surrender was not the end of your strength. It was the beginning of it, the hidden blessing behind the waiting. Waiting is one of the hardest tests of faith. It stretches your patience, challenges your confidence, and exposes your deepest fears. You pray, you believe, but nothing seems to move. The silence becomes louder than any promise. Yet in that very stillness, something holy is happening. God is not ignoring you. He is preparing you. Every second of waiting is a sacred workshop where endurance, wisdom, and strength are being forged within you. You see, God never wastes time. He redeems it. When He delays, it's never denial. He delays because He's building something that will last. He knows what you're not ready to carry yet. The waiting season is where He aligns your heart with His will. If He gave you everything the moment you asked, you would mistake His gift for your own effort. But when He makes you wait, you learn to trust His heart even when you can't trace His hand. That kind of faith builds unshakable peace. The truth is that growth rarely happens in comfort. The waiting room of life feels empty, but it's where your spiritual roots grow deepest. It's where you learn to stop measuring God's goodness by visible outcomes and start recognizing it in unseen grace. He's protecting you from premature blessings, things that might have felt like answers, but would have collapsed under the weight of immaturity. Waiting transforms desire into destiny by purifying it. Every story of restoration in Scripture had a waiting season. Joseph waited in prison before stepping into purpose. David waited years after his anointing before wearing the crown. Even Jesus waited 30 years for a ministry that lasted 3. Heaven moves by divine timing, not human urgency. And when the appointed time comes, what once felt delayed will suddenly appear inevitable. So if you're still waiting, take heart. The silence doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means the masterpiece isn't finished. God is writing a story that will make sense only when you look back and see how each pause was part of His design. What you perceive as delay is often the grace that protects your promise from coming too soon. Keep your posture of faith. Keep showing up in prayer even when nothing changes. Keep worshiping even when your heart feels heavy. Because one day, the door will open, the burden will lift, and the waiting will end. And when it does, you'll understand that every second of delay was working in your favor. The blessing wasn't withheld, it was being perfected. When God restores more than you lost. There is a moment in every story of faith when God doesn't just return what was taken, He multiplies it. He doesn't simply rebuild the ruins, He turns them into testimonies. When He restores, it is never a replica of the past. It is always a new creation, fuller, richer, deeper than before. Because restoration in the hands of God is not replacement, it is redemption. What you thought was lost forever becomes the foundation for a greater blessing you couldn't have imagined while you were still grieving. When Job lost everything, it looked like the end of his purpose. Yet when the time came, God didn't just give him back what was taken. He doubled it. The same truth echoes across every life He touches. He restores peace after chaos, but not the same peace, a stronger one that can't be shaken. He restores relationships, but with wisdom that prevents the same pain. He restores your faith, but with a fire that no disappointment can extinguish. Every loss becomes a seed, and when God breathes on it, it bears fruit that didn't exist before. You may be asking, why did it have to happen this way? Because without the breaking, there is no overflowing. Without the loss, there is no revelation of how deeply He loves you. God uses what was meant to harm you to train your spirit for the abundance to come. That's why some blessings arrive in the disguise of loss. You lose something small so that you can receive something eternal. Restoration begins when you stop mourning what was and start embracing what will be. God is too creative to repeat Himself. The blessing coming will not look like the one that left. It will be molded perfectly for who you have become through the journey. That's why He allowed certain doors to close. Not to punish you, but to position you for a greater season that your past could not contain. Sometimes what He restores is not even external. It's the part of you that forgot how to dream, the laughter you thought you'd never hear again, the confidence you thought was gone, the joy that once felt distant. God returns all of it, not as it was, but purified by fire, refined by faith. What comes back is not fragile. It's eternal. The day will come when you'll look back and realize you didn't just survive. You were transformed. You'll thank him not only for what he restored, but for what he removed. Because what he took was temporary, and what he's giving back is everlasting. God never restores halfway. He restores abundantly, because his nature is not to repair, but to renew. So lift your eyes. The same hands that once allowed something to leave are now preparing to place something greater in your life. What's ahead will not remind you of loss. It will remind you of grace. You haven't seen the best of God yet. The next chapter won't look like the last. It will look like redemption fulfilled. Walking in the light of a restored heart. Restoration is not just an event that happens around you. It is a transformation that happens within you. Once God restores what was lost, the true miracle is not in what you receive, but in who you become. A restored heart sees life differently. It no longer measures joy by possessions or peace by circumstances. It lives in gratitude, not for perfection, but for presence. The presence of God in every detail, in every breath, in every moment that once seemed ordinary. When God renews your heart, the world looks the same but feels completely different. The bitterness fades, replaced by understanding. The anxiety that once controlled your thoughts gives way to quiet assurance. The scars remain, but they no longer speak of pain. They testify of healing. You begin to walk lighter because you've learned to trust the unseen. You no longer chase closure from people or explanations from life. You rest in the truth that God has already written meaning into every moment you lived. A restored heart is free from comparison. It no longer needs to compete, impress, or prove its worth. It knows its value comes from the one who called it worthy long before the world ever noticed. This freedom is the fruit of grace, the kind that comes after you've been broken and rebuilt. It allows you to love again without fear, to give without expecting return, and to walk forward without glancing back. When you live from a restored heart, peace is no longer a feeling that visits. It becomes the home you carry everywhere. You wake up aware that each sunrise is a new conversation between your soul and your Creator. You learn to listen for His voice not only in prayer but in silence, in nature, in the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. You begin to recognize that the greatest restoration of all is not what happens outside of you, but what happens inside when faith becomes stronger than pain. And now you carry something sacred, the power to comfort others with the same comfort you received. The heart once shattered becomes the vessel through which God heals others. You don't need to preach. Your peace preaches for you. You don't need to explain. Your calm becomes evidence of divine restoration. You have walked through the valley and found the light again. Now everywhere you go, that light follows. This is what it means to walk in the light of a restored heart. To move through life no longer defined by what broke you, but refined by what saved you. To see beauty not in perfection, but in grace. And to live each day as living proof that when God restores, He doesn't just give back what you lost. He gives you the strength to never lose yourself again. The dawn of a new beginning. There comes a morning when everything feels different, even if nothing around you has changed. The air seems lighter, your heart quieter, and your spirit stronger. That is the moment when restoration turns into renewal, when the pain that once defined you becomes proof that God was never absent. This is the dawn of your new beginning, not because life suddenly became easy, but because your soul finally learned to rest in divine timing. Every chapter that led you here had a purpose. The tears, the silence, the losses. None of them were wasted. They were the refining fire that shaped your faith into something unbreakable. You are no longer the same person who entered the storm. You've walked through the valley, and now you carry wisdom that can't be learned from comfort. You've seen what happens when everything falls apart, and you've witnessed what grace can rebuild from the ruins. This new beginning is not about returning to what was. It's about stepping into what's next. The door that closed was not rejection. It was redirection. The people who left were not mistakes. They were part of your preparation. God never subtracts without planning to multiply. The things that ended were necessary to make space for the life He is now unveiling before you. You were never losing. You were being positioned. As you rise into this new season, remember that faith is not a one-time act. It is a daily posture. Keep your heart soft, your spirit expectant, and your hands open. Restoration has already begun, but now renewal must continue through your choices. Speak words of life, walk in gratitude, and let peace guide your steps. The same God who brought you this far will not abandon you halfway. His promise is not survival, it's abundance. Your story is now a testimony. You no longer need to explain your scars. They speak of divine healing. The strength that carried you through the darkness is the same strength that will sustain you in the light. You are living proof that no loss is final when grace writes the ending. What you see now is not the conclusion of your journey. It is the unfolding of purpose that was hidden beneath every trial. So take a deep breath and step forward. This is not the same road you once walked. It's a new path paved by faith and lit by mercy. The night has passed, the storm has quieted, and the sun has risen again. Let this morning be your declaration. God has restored what was lost, renewed what was weary, and awakened what was sleeping. You are standing at the dawn of a divine beginning, one written not in fear, but in everlasting hope. You have arrived not at the end, but at the start of everything God has promised. And now, your only task is to keep walking in the light He has placed before you. One step, one prayer, one new sunrise at a time.